In this video, we're going to talk about your assumptions training reality to correct itself. So this isn't just about autopilot following your assumptions. It's about autopilot correcting the flight because of your assumptions. So on this channel, we like to use aviation metaphors for shifting your self-concept and shifting your mindset and becoming a different version of you. So autopilot correcting the flight because of your assumptions is where all this comes together. And this is where Neville Goddard's teaching becomes incredibly clear, because Neville said an assumption builds a bridge of incidents that leads inevitably to the fulfillment of itself. So, but what is that bridge? Well, I can tell you that it's not always a straight road. Sometimes it can be delayed. Sometimes it can be redirected. Sometimes, like when you're in flight, it can look like turbulence. And sometimes it looks like things are moving behind the scenes that you can't yet explain. So in aviation language, we could say this: the bridge of incidents is the correction path. So once the destination is entered, the system begins adjusting itself and everything necessary to bring the aircraft back into alignment with the end, your destination. And your assumption works the same way, okay? So autopilot doesn't just follow, it constantly self-corrects. So we're pitch, yaw, and og while we're in the sky, and it isn't always a straight line system. It's a constant course correcting system. So every few seconds, it'll adjust, it recalculates, it compensates, it realigns and recenters and stays on the cardinal direction of what it's been programmed. So even if the plane drifts off course because of some turbulence or whatever, the autopilot brings it back. And just like your mindset, like when the 3D's acting crazy, you need to do the same thing in your mind. You need to come back and bring it back, return to your desire. And this is a really important part of the teaching on manifestation. So it's your assumption doesn't just set the destination. It begins training reality to correct itself around that destination, which is the fulfillment of your desire, whatever it is. So this is Neville's bridge of incidents, explained mechanically, as it were. So Neville said, an assumption builds a bridge of incidents that leads inevitably to its own fulfillment. And that means your assumption doesn't need a perfect path, but when it erupts and becomes reality, it's a beautiful thing. So it creates a path, and it organizes the incidents and arranges the movements and corrects the route. So when you assume the end, you're not begging reality to cooperate, are you? Of course not. You're entering the destination into your system. And once that destination is accepted, because you've been impressing your subconscious mind with it, the correction process begins. So just remember that everything in the 3D, your external conditions don't matter. Your autopilot recalculates anyway. Stay in the fulfillment of your desire in imagination, and it'll erupt. So when we're flying, like wind can push the plane and cause turbulence. Weather can shift and cause things to move around and behave wacky, because it's atmospheric pressure. Air pressure changes. And traffic, air traffic can reroute, based on wind movements and airways and, everything moving around, and that can be chaotic, but your autopilot doesn't panic. It does not say, this must be a sign that we're not getting there. No, on the contrary, the autopilot simply recalculates the path. So you just need to let it, okay? So, and this is exactly what Neville taught when he said that your reason and your senses may deny your assumption, but if you persist, your assumption will harden into fact. So you just need to relax and trust. So the 3D gets crazy for me sometimes, and it sometimes will get in your face like it doesn't agree with you, but eventually it's going to agree, because like Neville said, if you persist, your assumption will harden into fact. So while the facts of the 3D, may look the opposite, the senses may say, nothing seems to be happening, but the senses are not the navigation system, okay? They're just reporting the weather. The 3D is just weather. Turbulence is just 3D stuff. So your assumption is the navigation computer in this. And while weather may affect the flight, it doesn't get to choose the destination, okay? So continue to impress your subconscious mind with your desire. And when the 3D shifts and delays and anything contradicts your assumption or looks unstable, that doesn't mean that your assumption has failed. It may simply mean the system is recalculating, and you just need to let it. Don't react to the 3D. So your assumption recalculates the path no matter what the 3D in front of you throws at you, okay? So autopilot corrects even when you're not aware of it. Like I've been on flights and things are moving around and the pilot doesn't always have their hand on the yoke, So pilots don't often notice, every micro correction of the aircraft, and passengers never notice, but the system is working the entire time. So tiny adjustments are happening constantly, beneath the surface. And this is the subconscious. So Neville taught that the subconscious accepts as true that what the conscious mind feels to be true and then objectifies those accepted ideas. So in other words, once an assumption is heavily impressed deep enough, the subconscious begins to externalize it. It begins to move you. It begins to move circumstances. It begins to arrange conversations, timing, impulses, decisions, and events, and it's in your favor. And much of this happens without your conscious awareness. So your assumption, whatever it is working even when you're not thinking about it. Even when you're distracted, even when you're sleepy or tired, even when you have a moment of doubt. So just remember to stay in the wish fulfilled, okay? So the system doesn't shut off just because you had a bad day. And just like the autopilot does not stop correcting the aircraft because a passenger feels nervous, once the destination is entered, the deeper system keeps working and you continue to go towards your destination. So the plane can drift, but it can't escape the destination. You're just going to keep going the whole way. Let's go all the way, guys. So even if the aircraft drifts, miles off the ideal path, the autopilot still brings it back. So whenever you have thoughts, you need to learn to catch them. And even when stuff's going on that makes you think the opposite, continue to bring it back, continue to bring them back in alignment with your desire. And give yourself your desire. I always want to remind you that. Give yourself your desire and imagination and feel the joy and relief and impress your subconscious mind with it. Doesn't that feel joyful? It does for me. So, like I said, this is the entire purpose of the system, the autopilot, your subconscious mind. It does not require the flight to be perfect, okay? It only requires the destination to be programmed. And this is powerful when you apply it to your inner world. You can drift emotionally. You can drift mentally. You can have a moment of fear because we're having a human experience. You can have a moment where the old story feels loud, but you don't lose the manifestation just because you had a human moment. So Neville did not teach never drift. He taught persistence. So doubt cannot withstand the power of persistence and continuing to repeat. And it's the repetition of your assumption and pressing your subconscious mind with it. So Neville taught that remaining faithful to the assumption, even when reason and the senses deny it. He says that repeatedly across his books. So the question is not, did I have a doubtful thought? The question is, what destination am I returning to? A gust of wind does not cancel a flight plan. A negative thought doesn't cancel a manifestation. So a rough patch of turbulence does not mean the plane has failed. A moment of fear doesn't cancel your assumption. The plane can drift, but if the destination remains programmed, and it is, the system continues pulling it back to the end. Your assumption is that destination, and your persistence is what keeps it alive and active. So I hope this helped you like it helped me. And I love you guys, and I'll talk to you again in the next one. Bye for now.